Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan-Miller Report, U.S. intelligence officials say they were surprised by the collapse of Yemen's government. We have that story. Jordan's Air Force resumes raids against Islamic State. The EU says that they are ready for any more necessary steps if the newly Ukraine pact is breached. And one carjacker / robber ticks off the wrong mama. All those stories and more. Plus, Corey Evan has the latest on the nutter who caused such a nutjack of a problem on Korean Air.
And the Korean Air executive nutter, I almost said North Korea, is getting a trip to the Nut House. If you have a recently deceased relative whose Facebook is still active, don't panic. It's just a new Facebook feature. We'll tell you more about it. West Coast shipping ports are backed up as some workers go on strike. In lawsuits across America, a woman claims the surgeon misplaced her dentures. And I give my review of the SpongeBob movie. All those stories and more in the Evan-Miller Report, your conservative news source. It's starting right now, Sonny.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan-Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Thursday, February the 12th, 2015. And say it ain't so, Corey Evan has returned to the anchor desk. My goodness,
yes.
He's gone nuttered like the Korean Air executive.
We'll blame car troubles for that one. Had to have some work done on my whip.
There you go, folks. And Corey Evan will have more on the whip of the Korean Air coming up. And, of course, we'll have the latest going on at a Long Beach today as those people who's supposed to be unloading those boats, not unloading the boats. Where are y'all? Sleeping on the job?
Exactly.
All those stories and more tonight on the Evan-Miller Report. And why am I starting to speak Texan all of a sudden? Because I think we got a lot of stories out of Texas tonight. At least one about that mom, anyway. All right. Starting off, though, with some serious news tonight. We'll get over to the lighthearted stuff near the bottom of the hour. That's why we do the hard news first on the program, or you want to be staying tuned. The Obama administration senior counterterrorism official acknowledged Thursday that U.S. intelligence was surprised by the collapse of the U.S.-backed government in Yemen. Nick Rasmussen, who directs the National Counterterrorism Center, told the Senate Intelligence Committee that Yemen's American-funded army failed to oppose advancing Houthi rebels in the same way the U.S.-supported Iraqi military refused to fight Islamic State militants last year. Ooh, do we see a trend developing? Let's read on. What happened in Iraq with the onslaught of the Islamic State group happened in Yemen on somewhat smaller scale, he said. As the Houthi advance toward Sanya took place, they weren't opposed in many places. The situation deteriorated far more rapidly than we expected. Rasmussen made the admission under questioning by Senator Roy Blunt, a Missouri Republican, who noted that President Obama recently touted Yemen as a success. Now it's a total disaster, Blunt said. In response to other questioning, Rasmussen also noted that extremists in Libya, Afghanistan, Egypt, and Algeria had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State group, suggesting a growing influence of that al-Qaeda rival. The Islamic State group is now the dominant extremist group in the Libyan cities of Derna and Benghazi, where a 2012 attack killed 4 Americans, including U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens. And Corey, I'm going to bring you into the conversation. We're going to, every once in a while, we're going to come out on a story. We're going to give a little bit of an opinion on it. But it seems to me, Corey, that every time President Obama opens up his damn mouth and decides to talk about one of his successes in a particular country, the country goes boom, boom.
Every time that guy opens his mouth, it makes me wish I didn't have ears. But then again, if I didn't have ears, how would I be able to do this report?
Well, thank goodness he isn't a car salesman, because, man, the damn insurance rates be so damn sky high, you won't be...
Yeah, at least his own insurance rates, because if he were selling cars, he'd be lying up the wazoo just to sell a car, and then he'd have every customer he sold a car to coming back and saying, "This car is crap! What'd you do to this thing? Is there sawdust in the engine?"
Not only that, it'd be like the discount tire commercial. They'd be throwing every car through the window, and so much so that the whole building would fall on top of them.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Tires are next on my list.
Back to Corey's car. You were wondering, folks, how we were going to get back to Corey's car? Well, there you go. Car tires are expensive. All right, folks, moving on tonight. That is our opinionated story for the night here on the program, I promise you. Meanwhile, Jordanian Air Force jets bombed the hideouts of Islamic State militants in Syria on Thursday, state television said, reassuring the intensified raids that it first launched last week in retaliation for the killing of a pilot. King Abdullah has vowed to avenge the burning to death of pilot Motha al-Kasbai by Islamic State and has ordered his commanders to prepare for a bigger military role in the U.S.-led coalition fighting the militants in both Syria and Iraq. The Air Force has bombed and destroyed selected targets of the Danish criminal gang this afternoon. He said Danish is a derogative term, of course, for the militants, which we should be using a lot more on this program. All right, folks, moving on to France tonight, where it has been found that the Islamic State group published what it has described as an interview with the widow of one of the French gunmen who attacked a kosher supermarket and a police officer in Paris last month, claiming for the first time that she was among the extremist fighters. The text interviews in French and English, published Wednesday and Thursday, did not directly name Hayat Bouamandi or show images of her, instead identifying her only as the wife of Ahmed Kolbi or Uma Bashir al-Mahari. She is considered key to the investigation into the attacks in Paris, which left 20 people dead, including the gunman, although she left France just beforehand. The publication appeared to be the first confirmation from ISIS that she had joined the group in Syria, as she was widely believed after a posthumous video emerged of Colby pledging allegiance to its leader. The EU has warned Russia today it was ready to take further measures in addition to the sanction it has already opposed if a new Ukraine peace pact is breached. The bloc's President Donald Tusk has said the debate focused on how to support the implementation of the agreement. If it does not happen, we will not hesitate to take the necessary steps, the European Council chief told a press conference after a European Union summit. The summit focused on the truce deal signed earlier today in the Belarus capital, Minsk, after marathon talks between the presidents of Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France aimed at ending a 10-month conflict between Kiev and pro-Russian separatists. Tusk said the EU would go ahead anyway with new sanctions against 19 Russia and Ukrainian individuals, despite having agreed on Monday to suspend implementation for a week to boost the chances of success of the missed talks. Our trust in the goodwill of President Putin is limited. This is why we have to maintain our decision on sanctions, he said. Brussels first imposed targeted sanctions on individuals after Russia's annexation of Crimea in March of 2014, but adopted tougher economic sanctions after the shooting down of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 over Ukraine in July of last year. But Tusk said the leaders had not discussed any further sanctions against Russia. This comes as German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that the Ukrainian president was getting unexpected forced pressure from Putin to sign this deal at a truce. And of course, we'll keep an eye on the latest in that situation and if that truce ends up holding up here on the Evan-Miller Report. A Montana man has been sentenced to 70 years in prison for killing a German exchange student last year. This making international news from a national perspective. Marcus Karmloff fatally shot Janine Dindy, 17, of Hamburg last year after the teenager entered his garage. He was convicted of deliberate homicide in December. Defense lawyers said Carmena had shot in self-defense during a football player was attending Big Sky High School in Missoula, Montana for 1 year as part of an exchange program. Kremlin's lawyers plan to appeal the conviction and sentence. He will not be eligible for parole for another 20 years. The son of a family of Turkish immigrants to Germany, Duran had only 6 weeks left in the exchange program. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and send it over to Corey now. He has some of the day's other news, including the nutcase on Korean Air might be going to the nut house after all. Corey, tell us more.
Not might, is. ABC News tells me former Korean Air Vice President Cho Hyun-ah was sentenced today to 1 year in prison for a plane tantrum dubbed nut rage, with the court finding her guilty of diverting an aircraft, a violation of aviation safety law. The Seoul District Court noted that Cho had treated the flight as if it were her private plane. The Seoul-bound aircraft from JFK Airport in New York had been towed 55 feet away from the gate, was returned dropped-off Park Chang-jin, the head steward at the time, upon Cho's orders. Cho, the daughter of the airline's chairman, had raged over the way a stewardess served macadamia nuts in the first-class cabin. She claimed should have been in a bowl, not in a bag. The court found her not guilty of interfering with the Transportation Ministry investigation after the incident. Cho, in custody since December 30th, wiped away tears with a tissue as a letter expressing her remorse was read to the court by head judge Oh Seung-woo. The letter included details about how Cho, one of the richest women in Korea who rarely flew first class, was adjusting to the conditions of her prison and reflecting on her life. I know my faults and I'm very sorry, Cho said in her letter. I'm sure you are, but that's all 2020 hindsight. In the previous trial, Cho admitted to verbal and physical violence, throwing his service manual on the floor and pushing onto the female flights.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we do apologize about Corey Evans' signal. You're having some issues. Corey just did get some new technology. Apparently the technology's having a couple bugs tonight, so we're going to have Corey go ahead and call back in using an alternate method if he can. If he hears me on the other end, I'll have him do that, and we hope to get back to him, hopefully, as soon as possible here. Meantime, we got some other news to get to today, and we hope we get Corey Evan back. Police chased a carjacking suspect through the streets of Dallas yesterday, but it was an angry mom who brought him down. For more on this story, we're going to go to CBS Dallas Fort Worth for more on this story. We apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We seem to be having a couple technical glitches here tonight. So, meantime, folks, we're going to go ahead, take a short break. But when we come back, we hope to have Corey Evan back here on the program, and we'll be right back. Okay, we do have that story now, so let's go ahead and take that, if we please.
The wrong mom. All new tonight, she is telling CBS 11 what she was thinking when she took on that man herself.
Andrea Lucia live in Dallas, where she sat down with the family. Andrea?
Yeah, Dallas police were chasing their suspect when he rammed 3 cars parked at this intersection. Now, this is a school zone, and the angry mom in one car just lost control.
It just boom, and then I just went into a shock.
The impact of the crash caught 13-year-old TJ off guard. So did his mom's reaction.
And then I just saw my mom just whack, whack, whack. Most weirdest thing I ever seen in my life. My mom taking down a high-speed chase guy in the middle of the street.
Jessica Leisman grabbed the driver, Artry Alexander, and hit him repeatedly, helping her boyfriend hold him until police arrived.
I didn't even think. I just jumped out.
Her only concern,
my kid, you know, all I can think about is my kid is in here. You know, this is a place where you're supposed to go a certain speed limit because of kids.
TJ, how protective is your mom?
Very, probably overweight, protective.
if Leisman is a little overprotective, She says it's because her 4-year-old son, Jalen, who suffered from epilepsy, died 6 months ago.
For me to wake up and find my son lifeless, after I tucked him into bed at night.
TJ says he now prays every night.
I try to pray and make sure nothing bad happens.
The family knows their confrontation could have gone much worse. Police say they were pursuing Alexander for an armed carjacking in South Dallas. Officers later found the gun inside the stolen car. An ambulance took away a man from a third car involved in the crash. But this mother and son say they are just fine.
My son doesn't have a scratch. I don't have a scratch.
Well, Alexander is now charged with aggravated robbery and evading arrest. Dallas police say they don't recommend confronting fleeing suspects, but that in this case, Alexander, quote, ran up against a mama bear. Reporting live in Dallas, Andrea Lucia, CBS 11 News.
To say the least, Andrea, speaking of charges, we checked into his criminal history. This is what we found. This is 27 pages here detailing all kinds of run-ins with police, and this is over a decade. We saw family assault charges, marijuana possession, resisting arrest, evading arrest, also possession of a controlled substance. We posted the story and what Jessica did on our Facebook today. Things lit up. Barbara Ward calling her one of Charlie's angels. Marty Campisi saying, don't mess with the soccer mom. You can join the conversation anytime. Just drop in on us, CBS DFW on Facebook.
And many thanks to CBS Dallas Fort Worth for providing us that story. And Corey, I don't think people on Facebook are right. Don't mess with that, mama, because you mess with that, mama, no. It's not going to be pretty.
I try not to mess with women in general because I know that if you tick off the wrong one, you'll end up in... Let's just say that's a ticket to a festival of plastic death.
Plastic death indeed. And it doesn't help that this carjacker/robber came from the city of marijuana.
Exactly.
All right. Now, hopefully we got your signal back a little bit better. So we got a little trouble hearing you. Let's get a little bit more on that nutcase of an executive who's now going to the nut house.
Yeah, her name's Cho Hyun Ah. This was brought to me by ABC News. She's the daughter of the airline's chairman, Korean Air. She raged over the way a stewardess served macadamia nuts in first class. She said it should have been offered in a bowl, not a bag. The court found her not guilty of interfering with the Transportation Ministry investigation after the incident. She's been in custody since December 30th, and the letter that she wrote included details about how Cho, one of the richest women in South Korea who regularly...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we do apologize. Looks like we have lost Corey Evan once again. Bad connection issues tonight with Los Angeles, so we do apologize on that. All right, I'm going to have Corey Evan, if he can still hear me, please just call back on a regular landline if he can. I'm very sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Just sometimes technology is not being cooperative. Tonight, that seems to be the case, and we do apologize. We're going to go over to another story in Illinois, where Illinois residents may not be able to use their driver's licenses at airports starting in 2016. The Daily Herald reports the licenses don't meet requirements set by a 2005 federal law on IDs that was meant to increase security. Illinois doesn't require a birth certificate to get a driver's license, which an Illinois Secretary of State spokesperson says is one of the law's mandates. The spokesman says state legislators would have to approve funding for changes to driver's license requirements. The Secretary of State's office previously estimated it will cost up to $100 million to $150 million to be in compliance. Driver's licenses met the federal mandates in 22 states as early as 2016. The Department of Homeland Security website says travelers with non-compliant driver's licenses would need another valid ID, such as a passport or military ID. Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead, take a short break here on the program. Hopefully when we come back, we have Corey Evan back tonight. But also coming back up on the program, a court nixes faith-based birth control mandate challenge. We have that in our continuing fight against global socialism. Also, the state of Arkansas is to end their alternative Obamacare plan for the poor. And the Democrats have picked a state for their Democratic convention. We'll tell you where that is. Plus, a dog finds its owner 20 blocks away. We got that cute puppy dog story coming up on the Evan-Miller Report, your conservative news source, and we'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
Is radio.
News. News. Radio. News. Radio. Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Hey y'all, Cedric the Entertainer here with Niecy Nash, taking a break from shooting The Soul Man to introduce you to Patience.
Hi.
Patience is a patient at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Families never receive a bill from St. Jude for anything because all a family should worry about is helping their child live.
St. Jude won't give up until they end childhood cancer, sickle cell, and other deadly diseases.
Because of you, there is St. Jude.
Learn more at stjude.org.
Let's get back to the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
And welcome back to the Evan-Miller Report, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Corey Evans. Jason Miller will be back in just a few short moments. But first, veteran CBS News correspondent Bob Simon has been killed in a car accident in New York, CBS said. In his career spanning 5 decades, 73-year-old Bob Simon covered many war zones from Vietnam to the former Yugoslavia. At the end of his stint in Saigon in the 70s, he was one of the last helicopters out of the city, CBS said. Simon won multiple awards, including 27 Emmys for his reporting, and regularly appeared on the network's flagship program 60 Minutes. His last piece, a report about the Oscar-nominated civil rights drama Selma, went out on 60 Minutes at the weekend. Simon was a passenger in a hired sedan that hit another car stopped at a red light and then slammed into metal barrier separating traffic lanes, police said Wednesday. CNN's Anderson Cooper, who worked with Simon on 60 Minutes, said, quote, Bob was for the last 5 decades simply one of the best, in my opinion, at getting a story, telling a story, writing a story, and making it simply unforgettable, unquote. His death comes during an eventful week in U.S. broadcasting, with Daily Show host Jon Stewart announcing he'll quit, and the suspension of NBC News anchor Brian Williams for embellishing his Iraq war story. Right. Our next one, out of the Christian Science Monitor, the head of the Boston area public transit system resigned Wednesday amid commuter frustration over service disruptions during a spate of recent snowstorms that have pounded the region. Beverly Scott gave no specific reason for her surprise decision to step down effective April 11th, 7 months before her contract with the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority was to expire. She announced her resignation in a letter to John Jenkins, chairman of the board that oversees the MBTA, sent just hours after the board gave her a unanimous vote of confidence, which makes it all the more surprising to me. But at any rate, Scott said she would give priority during her final 2 months of restoring normalcy on the T after the recent disruptions, which included a complete shutdown of rail service Monday night and all day Tuesday. And hopefully, as she finally restores normalcy out there, they can finally move past these events, because it's just bringing back to mind what I've read about their experience with the bad Boeing light rail cars they had in the 70s. Those were awful, and I'll tell you about them at a later date. But if you have a Facebook friend who recently passed away and their account is still active, don't panic. They're giving users more control over their social networking afterlives with the legacy contact setting. With this enabled, a designated heir can change the deceased user's profile picture, pin a memorial letter to the top of the profile, and respond to friend requests. The legacy contact can also download an archive
Wait
of photos.
a second. Friend request to a dead person?
I have a feeling
that's
it's
just
like
weird.
friends that meant to. I have a feeling it's friends that meant to friend them in this life. Either that, or they're finally realizing that they had something in that person, even though they were holding some sort of grudge. Anyway, Facebook is making clear that this is not the same as handing over your password, they say. Legacy contacts won't be able to edit old posts, access private messages, or delete the entire account. Facebook told the Wall Street Journal that it ruled out further access for the first version, and noting that adding more responsibilities could just hinder the grieving process. You think? I mean, it's not the same as states giving digital will laws, and the U.S. government recommends creating your own. The best solutions will come from the online services themselves, they say, as they can provide granular controls over account access. And, of course, they're not the first to do so over at Facebook. Google's offered an inactive account manager since 2013. But having these controls on the world's largest social network, they say, will go a long way toward helping people figure out their digital legacy. Hopefully, it'll finally help the family of our friend Jonathan Downey, who passed away a couple of years ago, finally find some closure. But on a lighter note, from USA Today, Chandra Siwakoti, has had a brush with a very, very rich person, and he just got wealthy himself. Siwakoti owns the Apple Tree Food Mart in tiny Princeton, Texas, with just 7,700 people there. One of the 3 winning tickets that will split Wednesday night's $564.1 million jackpot was sold at Siwakoti's store, Texas lottery officials said today. Selling that ticket means $1 million for Siwakoti. His wife, Smriti Akaria, told WFAA-TV in Dallas-Fort Worth the family will use the money to help pay for their 6-year-old son's education. Winning jackpot tickets also were sold in North Carolina and Puerto Rico, lottery officials said. If the
Oh, as much as I wanted to hear Corey talking about Powerball, looks like we lost him there for a brief minute there. Let's see if we have him back. Corey, do we have you back, sir? Okay, no, we do not. That was a bummer. Apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try that one more time. All right, do we have you back, Mr. Corey Evan? Looks like the Powerball winners didn't want you to let out their private information.
Yeah, thankfully, though, there's one of the provinces, I believe it was Puerto Rico, doesn't allow that info to be handed out anyway, so it's just as well.
All right. Corey Evan with some of the day's other news. Now, it's time for the latest on the markets.
Good idea. Right. The Dow was up, get this, 110 points at 17,972. Hardly a record, but still a good territory. The NASDAQ followed suit with 56 more points at 850. And the S&P 500 just shy of adding 20 points at 28. European equities ended higher on Thursday with investors cheering a peace deal agreed between Ukraine and Russia following an escalation of violence in the region, according to CNBC. The pan-Euro Eurostoxx 600 index rallied to close 0.6% higher after Russian President Vladimir Putin confirmed that he had agreed to a peace deal with Ukraine. The leaders of France and Germany helped broker said deal. Speaking on Russian TV, Putin said the agreement would mean the removal of heavy weapons and a full ceasefire would be in place from midnight on February 15th. Stocks traded higher with the news as Russia's MICEX climbing 2% shortly after the announcement happened Thursday morning. The German DAX, which is exposed to the Russian market, ended up 1.5% higher. A slew of corporate earnings also helped to boost sentiment in the region on Thursday. Auto stocks were the major outperformer of the day, with shares of Renault rising as much as 11%. The car maker reported a tripling of full-year profit last year and highlighted more improvement in the year ahead. Meanwhile, Swiss bank Credit Suisse said fourth quarter net profit was $991 million, or the equivalent thereof, far exceeding expectations of $663 million. In a poll of analysts, shares suffered almost and finished
Oh, ladies
higher
and
after reporting a swing of.
We're having a signal issue once again with Corey Evan tonight. Just bad technology here, and we are having some weather issues out here in California. We have those Santa Ana winds blowing, so that probably has a lot to do with the cell phone towers being disturbed. So hopefully
we're having a shasa.
Yes, we are. Okay, looks like we got you back there. Why don't you go ahead and finish up our stock report?
So, in essence, if I were trading in Europe, I would be buying franks and beans and eating them behind the wheel of my little Renault Clio, because it's a good day over there. In the U.S., though, at least in the retail industry, not so much. According to Reuters, U.S. consumer spending barely rose in January as households cut back on purchases of a range of goods, suggesting the economy started the first quarter on a softer note. Sluggish spending came despite cheap gas and a buoyant labor market, leaving economists to speculate that consumers were using the extra income to pay down debt and boost savings. The Commerce Department said today retail sales, including cars, gas, building materials, and food services, edged up 0.1% last month. Rather limp. That followed a 0.3% drop in December and was below Wall Street's expectations for a 0.4% increase. The so-called core retail sales correspond most closely of GDP. Overall, retail sales slipped 0.8% in January, declining for a second straight month, falling gas prices undercut sales at service stations. The economy grew at a 2.6% annual pace in the fourth quarter. However, inventory and trade data for December was below the government's assumptions in the GDP report, suggesting growth could be revised to as low as 1.20%. And the cargo ships stuck in a traffic jam as they wait for a spot at the port of Oakland won't get a presidential break this holiday weekend after loading and unloading operations were suspended at 29 West Coast seaports for 4 days. The Pacific Maritime Association, which represents shipping lines and terminal operators, is refusing to pay OT to longshoremen for weekend and holiday work. The move is the association's response to what it claims are union work stoppages and slowdowns that have caused crippling delays and devastating economic losses. The association announced Wednesday that it will not hire crews to move containers at ports on the West Coast, including Oakland, starting Thursday, Lincoln's birthday, and continuing Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, President's Day. The shipping employers also idled vessel loading and unloading last weekend, adding fuel to an already volatile dispute with the International Longshore and Warehouse Union, which represents 20,000 dock workers whose contract ran out on July 1st. Work delays and stoppages over the past 3 months have caused mounting problems for Bay Area importers and small business owners who say they're losing money as trucks line up daily outside the port of Oakland, waiting for container ships anchored in San Fran Bay to unload. The shutting down of port operations is is ironic because it'll make the situation worse that union officials who claimed the association canceled a negotiating session Wednesday and has not been available since last Friday. Sounds like a load of beep, 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 all that sort of stuff. If only I had a ship's horn just handy right here so that I could wake them all up and get them back to work, because, quite honestly, it's going to affect my day job, I think.
Word is why the Port Authority says that the union workers do a half-assed job on the holidays. That's why they're not willing to pay them. And you know what? If the Port Authority has any proof on those comments, then I will tend to agree with them. You know what? You're going to come in, do a half-assed job on a holiday, and you know what? You don't deserve to be paid the extra to do the work. That's a simple thing about it.
Well, at the same time, I sometimes work Saturdays, having worked Monday through Friday, so on top of that, it does get pretty difficult after 6 days. So it is sort of hit and miss, those sort of overtime and holiday pays.
Yeah, but if a holiday comes on a regular weekday, you know what? Some people have to work it, and you know what? Welcome to America, ladies and gentlemen. You know what? Economy got to keep going somehow. So,
Yeah,
like
so
I said,
until the economy improves, just buckle down and grit your teeth.
That's what I would say to that, too. All right, Corey Evan with the business news. Thank you very much for that. All right, folks, time for the latest in our battle against global socialism. All right, we start off our fighting global socialism tonight, where a federal appeals court has reversed lower court victories by 2 Western Pennsylvania Catholic dioceses and a private Christian college that challenged birth control coverage mandates as part of the federal health care reforms. The 3-0 ruling Wednesday by the 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found that the reforms place no substantial burden on the religious groups and therefore don't violate their First Amendment right to religious expression. All 3 groups, the college and the Pittsburgh and Erie diocese, are ruling whether to appeal to the entire 3rd Circuit Court or the U.S. Supreme Court. All 3 groups, the college, I read that sentence, pardon me. Such a ruling should cause deep concern for anyone who cares about any First Amendment rights, especially the right to teach and practice a religious faith, said Pittsburgh Bishop David Zubek in a statement. He continued saying, this decision says that the church is no longer free to practice what we preach. Moving on to Arkansas, where Governor Asa Hutchinson has signed legislation that will end by 2017 the state's innovative but controversial adoption of Obamacare, which has provided nearly 190,000 residents with health coverage. Arkansas's private option plan uses federal funds from Obamacare to purchase medical insurance for some low-income individuals, rather than assigning them to the state's Medicare or Medicaid programs. The new legislation requires a task force to study state-funded health care spending and find alternatives to the program. Hutchinson, a Republican, signed it on late Wednesday. And we're going to go ahead and send it over to Corey Evan. He has more on tonight's global socialism.
Absolutely. Out of Mobile, Alabama, according to the New York Times, a federal judge in Alabama ordered that a county probate judge, sweet home Alabama, ordered that a county probate judge there must comply with their earlier ruling and cannot refuse to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. The federal judge, Cowley versus Grenade, on federal district court there, wrote that the county judge, Don Davis of probate court in Mobile County, cannot deny a marriage license on the ground that plaintiffs constitute same-sex couples or because it is prohibited by the sanctity of marriage. The decision was an effort to clarify that Judge Davis should follow Judge Grenade's earlier ruling striking down a state ban on same-sex marriage, rather than a conflicting order from the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, Roy S. Moore. While on the ruling Thursday was focused only on Judge Davis, it was intended to send a signal to judges statewide who are caught between the federal ruling and the order from Chief Justice Moore. And Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said Americans won't need a larger adjustment if the High Court rules that a gay marriage is a constitutional right. In an interview with Bloomberg, Ginsburg said Americans have been becoming more accepting of gay people in recent years. While speaking at an event in Minnesota in September, Ginsburg called the shift in Americans' attitude on gay marriage, quote, remarkable. Quote, having people close to us who say who they are that made the attitude change in this country, Ginsburg said. Earlier this week, Ginsburg colleague Clarence Thomas suggested the Supreme Court's decision to allow gay marriages to take place in Alabama suggests the High Court has made up its mind on the issue. In his dissent of the Alabama ruling, Thomas said the court's decision, quote, may well be seen as a signal of the court's intended resolution as it considers cases from 4 other states on the constitutionality of same-sex marriage. And, Jay, I'm sure that you have a few words for Miss Ginsburg.
Yes, I disagree with Ms. Ginsburg. I really think this gay and lesbian marriage issue is really being shoved down our throats as of late. And you know what? This isn't the first time Judge Moore has been shut down. If you remember back, Cora, about 10 years ago, Mr. Moore, as a district judge, made a judgment to keep the 10 Commandments up and was removed from office for that decision. So this isn't the first time that Mr. Moore has been railroaded over on the decision that he has made in his state regarding an issue such as this. So it just
seems like they're just tying him to the rail so that he can't move and end up sliced by the next passing train.
Yeah, it sure is. I feel sorry for for Judge Moore, what he's doing. It really shows a good American here when he's trying to fight for America's rights, and the socialist or communist, whatever you like to call them, I call them communist, you can call them what you will, are trying to shut him down and shove diversity and global socialism down our throats.
If Jeremy Clarkson were here on American soil, he'd probably say something like, if you shut this down, I'm going to come there, I'm going to eat your heart. He actually said that in the Top Gear episode 1.
All right. What else you have tonight?
That was the one I had. I think those two issues complement each other hand in hand, don't you?
Yes, certainly do. All right, Corey Evan with tonight's Global Socialism. Thank you very much for that. All right, moving on, some D.C. news tonight. Well, despite interest from New York, Columbus, Ohio, Philadelphia is now set to host the Democratic National Convention during the week of July 25th. And for those of you asking us here at SHR if we're going to be there, I don't think so. Democrats' decision to nominate the party's presidential nominee in Philadelphia is a major win for former Governor Ed Rendell, who has been spearheading efforts to convince Democrats to choose the city he once led. Rendell served as Philadelphia's mayor from 1992 to 2000. The last time Philadelphia hosted a presidential convention was back in 2000, when Republicans chose then Texas Governor George W. Bush as the party's nominee. Presidential conventions are expensive endeavors for cities, which are expected to shoulder more than $60 million in costs to stage the event. But the payout could be triple that investment or more, said DNC Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz when she talked to officials last year that past presidential conventions have injected approximately $150 million to $200 million directly into the hostess city economy. Of course, Cleveland will host the Republican Party's nominating convention during the week of July the 18th. And yes, Corey, I did hear you're laughing there. Nobody can pay me any amount of money to go over to the Democratic National Convention and hang out with the likes of those commies.
Yeah, we'll leave that to the folks at NBC. Oh, wait. They're short a man because they don't have Brian Williams.
Yeah, he may not have a job at the end of things. And God help us if Rachel Mad Cow takes over the coverage.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. Be afraid, ladies and gentlemen. Be very afraid when Rachel Mad Cow shows up and is headlining the Democratic National Convention. And this is a prediction. If she shows up and starts headlining over there, we have a very sad of U.S. state affairs.
Or even worse, when BS artist Eiffel.
Ooh, see? We can go through a list of liberal communist commentators, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be here all night. Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. TransCanada Corp will temporarily suspend efforts to seize Nebraska land for its much-delayed Keystone XL oil pipeline after landowners sued in what one obstacle the Canadian company still faces in the 1,179-mile project. A Holt County District Judge issued a temporary injunction today, keeping TransCanada from invoking eminent domain along the proposed Keystone XL route in northern Nebraska, while a lawsuit by landowners in the county plays out. TransCanada agreed to the order, hoping to get an accelerated trial schedule so that it can quickly resolve the legal disputes. A TransCanada spokesman said a similar agreement is being sought in southern Nebraska's York County, where landowners have filed another lawsuit seeking to keep the Calgary-based company from seizing land using eminent domain. A hearing in Holt County has been set for February the 25th on the issue of case projection, TransCanada spokesman Mark Cooper has said. Last month, TransCanada filed legal papers in 9 Nebraska counties to invoke eminent domain for the land that's needed to construct and operate and maintain the pipeline. It would go from Canada through Montana and South Dakota to Nebraska, where it would connect with the existing pipelines to carry more than 800,000 barrels of crude oil a day to refineries along the Texas Gulf Coast. And that's your latest on your DC News.
And now it's time for lawsuits across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Thank you, as always, Mr. Pat Hahn. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Come to order. Lawsuits across America is now in session for this almost Friday. First item on the docket, Reverend Jesse Jackson. I said almost Friday. Didn't I? Anyway. Yeah, it's an almost Friday, people. Anyway, Reverend Jesse Jackson earlier said parents of Jackie Robinson West players would sue Little League International over the decision to strip the team of its national title.
Oh, no. It's a load of Jackson and Sharpton. Whenever someone makes an honest decision on someone being infringed, in this case where it hasn't been infringed at all, the Little League, National Little League made the right decision. Why, oh why, do we have freaking blowhards like Jesse Jackson coming to the rescue of adults who make bad decisions and are bringing in kids from other counties who are not within this little League team's district? I've read the press releases on this. I've watched the affiliate over in Chicago. What the hell is wrong with this, people? Damn, load of freaking BS.
That's when the attorney for the team is saying it's too early to know if a lawsuit is warranted. Thursday morning, Jackson said parents would be suing to reverse the decision by Little League International to vacate Jackie Robinson West wins from 2014 for allegedly violating residency rules. But, Attorney Victor Henderson said he wanted to gather all the facts about the allegations against the team and the investigation by Little League International before making a decision. Henderson said the team has not yet received any details from Little League International explaining why it's being stripped of its title. He wants to look into other cases of Little League teams allegedly violating residency requirements to find out if they face similar punishments so he can determine if Jackie Robinson West was treated fairly. He also said that threatening a lawsuit would be nothing more than saber-rattling, and no lawyer worth his salt would threaten to file a lawsuit without knowing all the facts of the case, as Jay was saying. Coming to Denver, out of NBC affiliate in Denver, after a 3-week battle in federal court, 5 former and 2 current Commerce City warehouse workers won a discrimination and retaliation lawsuit against Matheson Trucking to the tune of close to $15 million. 5 of the 7 plaintiffs are immigrants from Africa and Brazil. They testified before a jury telling them about the discrimination they faced on the job back in 2010 and 2011. According to the suit, black employees worked on one side of the warehouse and whites worked on the other. White supervisors and staff were accused of calling employees racial epithets and lazy, stupid Africans. The jury returned a guilty verdict on Wednesday. Each of the plaintiffs will receive $2 million each. Wednesday's verdict against Sacramento, California-based Matheson Trucking and Matheson Flight Extenders included $13 million in punitive damages. Oh boy, many of the plaintiffs say they feel justice was served on that one. A Matheson attorney said the company would appeal. Of course they do. The company transports mail for the U.S. Postal Service and private vendors such as UPS and FedEx, so of course they're going to try and cut some of their losses. Good luck on that one. And out of Jersey City, from NJ.com, a Kearney woman is suing Medellin Hospital Medical Center in Secaucus for letting her dentures lodge in her esophagus while she was under anesthesia for a 2013 surgical procedure. Lord Rivera eventually needed a tracheostomy to remove lower partial dentures that got stuck in her esophagus and remained there for 3 months, according to the lawsuit filed in State Superior Court in Hudson County last month. During a 2013 echocardiogram, doctors inserted an endoscope into Rivera's mouth and esophagus, the lawsuit claims. While her upper dentures were removed, the lower weren't, the lawsuit claims. When Rivera was discharged a month later, the hospital could not find her lower dentures, the suit says. In December, hospital officials sent Rivera a letter acknowledging that they had misplaced the dentures and offered reimbursement for lawyers' stay. A spokesman for the hospital couldn't be reached for comment. Rivera had gone to the hospital to be treated for a stroke, according to attorney Danielle Laterra, who is also representing Rivera. She was discharged from Medellin on September 27th of 2013, more than 2 weeks after doctors failed to notice the dentures during a second procedure, the lawsuit says. Laterra says his client complained to her daughters of throat pain and trouble chewing after the procedure and still has a raspy throat, he said.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So the first time that they were in there, they dropped the dentures down her throat, left them in their throat. They went back in there twice, didn't notice the dentures in there, and she had to go in there 3 times before they found these damn things?
Correct!
Holy crap!
I know, right? Why don't they notice the fake teeth somewhere? I mean, those are the most obvious things in the world, fake teeth. How do you not notice that? Especially when they go down so much wrong.
Oh, that was one, as our old sound effects board likes to say, that's one serious what?
You have been.
You think? Holy cow! And on that note, unless you've got a lawsuit for me, Jay, and if you've got lawsuits for me, you at home listening to this, post them at facebook.com/the Evan-Miller Report. I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about this one and other lawsuits that are happening across this great old nation. For Lawsuits Across America, I'm Corey Evans. Case dismissed.
Oh, man. Corey Evan with the jaw-biting Lawsuits Across America tonight. My. Literally, the jaw is dropping right out of your mouth, ladies and gentlemen. We can't get any better than that, I don't think. All right. It's time for the latest in entertainment. Here's Corey Evan, and Corey, should we be putting a parental guidance warning out for the upcoming film that is coming out this weekend?
Let's see. If it's Kingsman: The Secret Service, yeah, it's rated R, ladies and gentlemen. That's
I was
opening
more
up this
thinking
week.
50 Shades of Beep!
That too. Yeah, those are the two that you should really watch out for, though the critics say 50 Shades of Grey is not really worth your time. They tend to favor Kingsman: The Secret Service. And What We Do in the Shadows, that's another one that's coming this weekend. And speaking of box office, the SpongeBob movie is #1 with $55.4 million already coming in. And I went to see it this week, Jake. You've got to be a fan of the SpongeBob cartoon in order to understand what's going on there, because it does get quite combobulated at times. But in essence, in the movie, a pirate manages to get a hold of a magic quilt and rewrite what's happening in the city of Bikini Bottom, specifically making the Krabby Patty formula suddenly just disappear out of thin air. Poof! And throws the city into chaos, and they blame SpongeBob and Plankton, who, in an unlikely teaming up, managed to go to the surface, find the Krabby Patty nabbing pirate who rewrote the Krabby Patty into his own possession using said magic quilt, and it becomes a knockdown drag-out to get it back. Now, I thought at times that this film was sort of like an acid trip in motion, but I found it strangely satisfying because they finally found a way to bring the worlds of 2D animation, 3D animation, and live action all together, and I think they did a half-decent job of it. So essentially, I will go ahead and give this one a heaven help me, yes, you should go see it, folks. You will get a kick out of it. I know it's designed for kids, it's written for kids, but the grown-ups, there's plenty of humor in it for you as well. Especially when they go back in time to try and find out what happened to the Krabby Patty formula. Yeah, they love making use of those crazy-sounding tunes and whatnot that make it sound like you're on an acid trip. You know, all the weird little visuals that make you look like you're tripping out and all that sort of stuff.
All right, Corey Evan with the movie review of SpongeBob SquarePants. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't normally endorse films, but considering the two films that are coming out this week, I would consider it a good alternative to go see that film than any of those two combined. And by
So
the
I
way,
still think we're going to have to wheedle you into seeing SpongeBob.
yeah, you will have to weasel me in, but I can tell the audience I would rather them see that. That's just this newsman's opinion of seeing that film. Than,
Yeah, if you had to choose. It's like the lesser of two evils, isn't it?
There you go.
Or is it three evils with you when you have two R-rated movies coming out the same week?
Well, let's just say Hollywood hasn't been known to bring out good films these days. All right, Corey Evan with the entertainment news. And finally tonight, after her owner was hospitalized following a cancer-related surgery, a miniature Schnauzer named Sissy undertook an incredible journey to be by her side. Nancy Frack's husband, Dale, was grief-stricken when Sissy ran away from their Cedar Rapids home last Saturday, 2 weeks after Nancy left the house for treatment for her cancer. According to television station KCRG, she wasn't lost, though. Sissy was later then spotted 20 blocks away, walking alone through the automatic sliding doors of Mercy Medical Center. Surveillance shows the determined Schnauzer looking around, unsure of where to go inside. She wanted to go see her mom, Dale Frock told the station. She was on a mission, but she couldn't find the right elevator to take. The security guard checked Sissy's text and called Dale, who realized why his beloved Schnauzer had run away. I don't know how she found the right door or did any of that herself, said Nancy Frank. The Franks say Sissy had never run away before and has never been to the hospital where Nancy was, which happens to be Mercy Medical Center. But the Franks said the only thing they could think of is that she might have recognized the cancer center Nancy works at next door to the hospital. On occasion, Sissy had been in the car when the family had picked up Nancy from work. Whatever the case, the unexpected surprise meant a lot to Nancy. She said, quote, "It was just great to be able to see her. That was perfect." And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, that is the Evan-Miller Report for this Thursday, February the 12th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller.
And I'm Corey Evan. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook.com/The Evan-Miller Report and tweet us at EM Radio Report. You'll be glad you did. For all of us here at SHR Media, we thank you very much for tuning into this report, and we hope you'll look forward to our next report tomorrow. Have a good night, everyone.
Coming up next on the SHR Media Network, the Exceptional Conservative Show with Ken McClinton. Good night, everybody.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.